I'm Lowell. I'm the Executive Director of Tacoma Tree Foundation. Been doing this work for about 4 years now, but we're a community-based organization based in downtown Tacoma, and we focus on urban forestry. So that means tree planting, it means education, and it also means advocacy so that we can have better policies at our local governments that encourage folks to care for trees, to preserve existing trees, and of course plant new ones. So that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, and I'm Ailene Ettinger. It's always fun for me to be back at University of Washington. I got to grad school here. And I now work at the Nature Conservancy. I've been there for about 6 years as the quantitative ecologist. I work in, as Angela said, a broad range of systems, but I started working with Lowell 4 years ago on breeding research in Tacoma. So that's what I'll mostly be sharing about today. But the Nature Conservancy is a global organization. We're in about 80 countries, and here in Washington we have preserves all over the state and also do a broad range of policy and science work.
And I'll also say here at the beginning that we don't expect all of you to be experts in urban forestry, but we want to invite you to think about how it connects with whatever it is that you're researching or working on right now. And a question that we had for all of you is just, what do you value about trees in your neighborhood? Kind of like popcorn style. If anyone wants to speak up and say something they like about trees in your neighborhood.
We know you're used to thinking about fish, so it gives you a little bit of time to...
It's okay, I come from forestry. I have a balcony with a tree right in front of it, and it keeps it like a normal temperature on my balcony in the summer.
Yeah, normal temperature.
Just this aesthetic value, the shapes, the silhouettes, so cool.
Yeah.
The bald eagles sitting on the trees, we can see from our office.
That's fun.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Others?
Some of them have apples.
Yeah. Fruit trees. How about everybody? Would you mind sharing something else?
Right now I like watching the colors change in all the trees.
Oh yeah.
My cat really appreciates watching all the birds.
Amazing. Yeah, so there's all different things that trees are doing for us in the city. Some of them are environmental, some of them are social, and today we're going to give you like an overview of some of those tree benefits. We'll talk about how we're using data in our work, and I think our partnership is really exciting because we're sort of the community-based organization, but when we bring in research to it, it helps us build the case. So we'll talk about how that data is working, and we'll just keep on moving. So I think this is me, right? We didn't rehearse a lot of this, but tree benefits. So urban trees, you already mentioned quite a few of them, but some of the benefits of trees might surprise you. They, of course, clean the air, clean the water, cool the neighborhood, but they also provide things like public safety. So trees are correlated with, better safety outcomes. They are essential in slowing down traffic. That's one of my favorite tree benefits. They slow down cars because visually, if there's trees covering your street, it makes you want to be cautious and go slower. So lots of different things. But then stress reduction is a big one for physical health and mental health. And then green spaces make us more active and help us build connections with each other too. So one of the big motivators in our work is the social connections that people get when they're working with trees, or they're planting trees together, like we're going to do tomorrow down in Tacoma. And that social cohesion is a really underrated benefit that trees have too. Go ahead.
Yeah, so these have been widely studied and are well acknowledged in many cases, all these benefits. But a challenge for urban forestry is that trees are often not distributed equitably throughout cities, and so this is from a study by some of my colleagues at the Nature Conservancy, and it was a look countrywide in cities, and just highlights kind of the problem. This, our thing is getting cut off a little bit, but on the y-axis there is median tree cover percent, and then the x-axis is percentile of income, and so you can see this linear relationship between income and tree cover, such that we have at higher incomes, we typically have higher tree canopy, and this is true in many cities in the U.S. And as well as cities around the world.
Yeah, in Tacoma, we have a special problem, which is of all the cities that have measured in the region, we have the lowest tree canopy coverage. And it's at 20%. That compares to Seattle, which in 2018 had 28%, and now I think it's down to 26% or something. But still, for being an urban area, Seattle has more people, more development happening. And in Tacoma, we're starting from a lower baseline. We have a lot of industry, we have a lot of pavement, and so this is one of the things that's motivating our work. And this is a story I talk about a lot. I call it Tacoma's unfair forest, because not only are the trees, we have fewer trees than other places, but they're distributed unfairly. And so this map is doing two things. The green dots are tree canopy, are trees. And the background, there's a white shaded background and a gray shaded background. And the white is neighborhoods with higher equity and opportunity, and the gray are areas with lower equity and opportunity. And basically the difference between these two halves of the city is double the tree coverage. So if you live in an area with wealth, you're more likely to have access to tree benefits than if you live in a spot like I do, which is kind of close to downtown, and we have very low tree canopy, poor air quality, and lots of pavement. So this is true of cities all across the United States. It's not unique to Tacoma, but in Tacoma, like I said, we're starting from a lower level, so that we feel it more, I think, on the ground. And then I think one of the connections we wanted to emphasize for your group is the connection to stormwater. Many of you are probably familiar with this, but there's several different ways that trees benefit the stormwater situation by capturing it or slowing it down, and in the process it helps prevent extra stormwater runoff that gets polluted and goes down into the waterways. So they're doing it through their leaves, they're doing it through their roots, and on a scale as large as a city, that's really essential infrastructure. And so actually in Tacoma, one of the ways that urban forestry work is funded is through stormwater rates that we all pay as utility ratepayers. And some cities don't do that, but it's a good way to get things paid for from a funding perspective. So yeah, I encourage you all to dig into those
connections with this room has had trouble in the past
I
with
don't know if it's just
the connection.
It's the connection, or if it's a setting to go to sleep if we're not. Wait, I don't know. We'll just try to be quick because we do have a lot of material. No, but it does seem to be a connection issue because now.
This room has had trouble before, and it's not. If it's
Right.
pulling on the connection.
Okay, maybe that. I'll move my battery, my heavy battery. So
That's good, yeah.
that's not. Maybe it's. Alright, we'll try that. Do you have more you wanted to say about
Nope.
stormwater? Hold on, while we. Did I just? Oh, I unplugged the wrong. But that's fine. Okay. Let's make this work. The other sort of infrastructure component that cities often think about in planting or choosing where to plant their trees is their cooling benefits. So urban trees can really help to buffer some of the urban heat island effects that you see in cities with lots of impervious surfaces and pavement and concrete.
Yeah, so heat is actually the deadliest natural disaster that we have in the United States. And it's especially bad in Seattle-Tacoma area because many of us don't have air conditioners. So in a weird way, our moderate climate is making it more dangerous for people. And in the heat dome in 2021, there were over 100 people in Washington who died from that heat event. And most of them were in, I understand, urban areas like South Tacoma where the neighborhood just can't cool down at night. And so it's pretty dangerous, and it's a public health issue that trees are a part of solving, I think.
Sorry, now I patience.
So so I wanted to share a little bit, at least a photo of some of our staff members. We're definitely tree huggers, and we do all these different things in order to kind of increase the stewardship of the urban forest in our area. We have a tree planting program, and we focus mostly on residential neighborhoods and bringing trees close to where people live so that they can have all those tree benefits right outside their doors. And we don't do as much around like habitat restoration. So that's kind of a distinction where we're trying to tackle that issue of having trees in neighborhoods that are integrated. Because along with the equity issue I mentioned, trees are concentrated in Tacoma, like in our parks and our steep slope areas that can't be developed. And then when you get out into the neighborhoods where people actually live, that's where we see a greater disparity. So we're trying to raise awareness about this and, like I said, push public policy forward at the same time. And if I remember, I'll tell you about a couple of events and opportunities we have coming up in the next couple of months.
Yeah, and I had the good fortune to become involved, meet to mingle, and start working together through the Screening Research in Tacoma project that we pulled together 4 years ago in response to a Puget Sound Partnership funding opportunity, Social Ecological Systems Award. And our project really aims to build knowledge and understanding about how human well-being and greening intersect. And it's focused on this neighborhood in Tacoma, but part of the motivation behind it is that we have now, we already shared with you a lot of the benefits that have been studied, documented, but a lot of times that research has happened at kind of a zoomed out scale using remote sense technologies and data sets. And less well understood and less well studied is on the ground, like what are people experiencing when you go into a neighborhood that's low tree cover and experiences some of the things that we talked about, like high, often is associated with low equity, but also higher temperatures. If you go in and green that area, how do people experience that change? How long does it take for some of the benefits of trees to be experienced, and what do people feel about it? What are they experiencing on the ground? And so that's the goal of this research, to kind of fill that research gap, but also serve community members and serve the city and help improve urban forestry. And so it came about as this opportunity. It was a really fortunate opportunity that doesn't always come up, this chance to kind of work together, researchers in academia with practitioners and community organizations. And this Madison District Green Stormwater Infrastructure was planned in this location in Tacoma. It was a stormwater project because there's an aquifer here in this neighborhood in Tacoma, shown in red. And so they plan to put in permeable pavement and bigger capacity water storage underneath, and then also plant hundreds of trees. And so this is an opportunity for us to collect some pre-treatment or pre-project data and understand and then post-treatment and understand what's happening. And so in addition to Lowell and I, or the Nature Conservancy and Tacoma Tree Foundation, we have partners with the Urban Forestry program in Tacoma, and also folks here at UW, Professor Greg Bratman, who's over in the forestry, School of Forestry, his lab leads the human well-being component of the study that I'll talk a little bit about as well. Anything else you want to say?
No, I think just it was an opportunity because there was all this tree planting happening in one neighborhood that really needed trees, and so it was like, what can we learn about that process, and how's the community going to respond when they see a big change like that? So our role was to be the community partner and collect feedback and let people know what's happening. And it's been kind of a multi-year project, and as of now, the project, that piece was built by the city, and so you really can see a before and after kind of effect, and it visually changed quite a bit of the neighborhood.
So now we were going to share a little bit about some of the data that we're using as part of, some of the quantitative data that we're using as part of this research, and just beyond in urban forestry generally. Yeah.
Great. We already kind of shared this, but this is data from City of Tacoma, where they've actually put things side by side. So tree canopy on the left-hand side and how it compares to urban heat issues. And it's not a perfect correlation, but you can see on the urban heat map specific spots. And places that have lots of pavement and low tree cover obviously have higher heat issues. One of our hot spots is here on the east side of Tacoma, along Portland Avenue. And that's an interesting one because there are trees, like there's a big forested area over here, and yet there's an urban heat island effect happening. So it's not always clear exactly why, but generally it's more pavement that soaks up heat and lower trees that would cool things off, making these hot spots across town. I think another thing to say is just that this data is very powerful. When we show this to policymakers, they understand that this is a problem and they can see a connection with the tree issue. So even though we're not like heat researchers, we've kind of gotten involved because it helps understand or helps tell the story about the need for trees in the city. Another tool that we use all the time is called Tree Equity Score, and this is a tool from American Forests, which is a national nonprofit, and they've developed this model to take every census block across urban areas across the whole country, and they gather data on tree canopy and race and income and urban heat, and they put it all together in their algorithm, and they use it to identify the spots that would benefit the most from trees, from intervention and increases in tree canopy. So on the map here, the greener spots are areas that are doing well in terms of tree equity, and the more orange spots are the areas that would be the highest priority. So we are able to take data like this and use it to inform our proposals when we do tree planting projects. We can say, hey, this part of South Tacoma or Parkland or the Fife neighborhood just outside the city limits are the highest priorities for tree planting. And then, so data like this helps us to know that we are focusing on the right areas or the highest impact areas. So Tree Equity Score is a really great tool, and there's actually a more detailed version now for only Washington State called the Tree Equity Analyzer, and that goes down to the parcel level. So not just census block, but we can go zoom in on a park and we can scope out a project and say, hey, if we planted 10 trees here, what would the benefits be, or where should we put them? So American Forests, these tools are really great, and it's interactive. So if you go to this map, you can click on your neighborhood and see how you're doing compared to neighboring spots. So like I said, the way that we use this data, we put it together and we come up with a planting prioritization tool. So this is another City of Tacoma tool, and it shows that kind of the darker spots on the map, based on everything that we know, all the data that we've mentioned, these should be the highest priority areas for planting trees. It doesn't mean it's the easiest spot to plant trees. It means that this is where they're needed the most. So you can see an area like South Tacoma over here is a high priority, but like I said, it already has a lot of pavement, and so it's not necessarily the most plantable part of the city. So that's the ongoing challenge with the more urbanized areas, is it's actually harder to find spaces to plant trees. But this is what we're trying to do, and we're developing programs around this idea of focusing on the neighborhoods that need trees the most. Which leads me to our Green Blocks program. This is the initiative that we have at the Tree Foundation, and it's really a neighborhood-based approach where we get community members involved, and we actually send volunteers out to people's houses to plant street trees. And so this is just a photo of some of our volunteers with a homeowner, and through this approach, we're able to focus only on those areas, and you can see a visual impact because it's happening in just a few square blocks. People get excited, there's like a sense of momentum and like a snowball effect almost, where when people see trees being planted, they are excited and they want to opt into it. And they also can get involved. So that's what we've done with our Green Blocks program, and I think the neighborhood specific thing captures a lot of motivations from people. There's a sense of community pride that comes up when their neighborhood is chosen and we go to this spot. We're actually doing this tomorrow in South End neighborhood of Tacoma, where we're gonna be planting, I think, over 100 trees tomorrow in one day with like 12 volunteer teams going out there. So it's really exciting, really fun, and it is informed by the data that we're sharing.
Yeah, and then speaking of data, so the GRIT is Green Research in Tacoma. It was a chance to connect even finer scale data. So in one neighborhood in Tacoma, we put out these temperature loggers across this area, about 57, and we installed them on utility poles, and the goal is to just quantify tree cover and temperature relationships pre tree planting and then post tree planting as well, but also just getting the context for in this neighborhood, what does that relationship look like? And so these sorts of studies have been done in other places, but not at only one other study that I find was at a sort of similar scale. Usually it's like urban to rural gradients or so, but we found we did this within one neighborhood. And then alongside this environmental data collection, as I mentioned, we were working with folks in Greg Bratman's lab who were working on community well-being. And so they did a qualitative interviews, and then they also did a quantitative survey pre and post planting. And the post planting data are still being analyzed. So the planting just happened, let's see, 2024, I think, the winter of 2024. The post planting survey was this year, so we haven't integrated all our work. So I'm just presenting on some of the sort of relationships that we found with tree cover. Not surprisingly, within this neighborhood, more tree cover equals lower temperatures. This is the relationship this is just on one day, on one of the hotter days in July of 2022. And one of the things that I thought was interesting about that we weren't sure what we would find is that this was basically a linear relationship, and this was true on most days of the year. We weren't sure if we'd find something more like a threshold relationship where you have to get to some tree cover before you see a benefit, but we found in most cases it was a pretty linear relationship. And the other thing that we found was pretty interesting was really large variation for a relatively small area. So on average, at any given time, it was about 2.57 degrees Celsius that was the variation, but up to, we recorded differences of up to like 10 degrees Celsius at a given time. So that was sort of the magnitude that's been quantified in urban to rural gradients. It's kind of interesting that you see that variation within just one city, one small neighborhood within a city. The other, well, I'm gonna jump ahead because I could go on and on, but if you have questions, more questions about the data, have to go back to it. I just want to we don't have a lot of time. So the other thing I'll highlight that we sort of looked at is like trying to make this connection to human health. And so what does this mean that we're seeing these, when you see this variation in temperature, what does that mean for human health? And so just as one example, we use this threshold of 32 degrees Celsius, which is a high temperature threshold at which some occupational health effects go into place. You have more regulated, you have to give your workers more breaks, and it affects outdoor worker health at temperatures above that range. And so with trees within, if you go from trees within, this is just within 10 meters, but tree cover quantified within 10 meters, you can see the probability declines of pretty dramatically, going from to exceeding this temperature. So trees can help reduce the impact. Those three lines with it varied with elevation. Higher elevation is a weaker relationship. So that's just one example of a human health implication and how you can tie these effects to what people are feeling. The other way that we're exploring how people are experiencing this impact is through the quantitative and qualitative interviews that I mentioned. So this is where, that we'll get to in a little bit, because we don't have the quantitative data yet from the quantitative surveys. But moving into the next kind of point that this project makes me think about as a quantitative ecologist, and that I'd be curious to hear your experiences and thoughts about this as well. But as a quantitative ecologist, this project and others highlights to me the importance of integrating qualitative data as well, especially when you're thinking about social ecological systems, and really the context of your work is critical. And so this project has been a really interesting and important way to merge quantitative and qualitative approaches, and so it's provided an opportunity for us to work across different organizations that we've mentioned, but also even within University of Washington or within research, for merging qualitative and quantitative approaches is really critical in order to get at the question we really want to, which is like, how are people experiencing this, and what do these changes mean for people? And this kind of collaborative project is really a great opportunity to do that, and one that I certainly didn't experience very much when I was in academia before coming to this. So it's been really interesting and a great learning opportunity. So just as some of the examples of what we learned from the qualitative research, which has then fed back into shaping our research moving forward. So Olivia Hill is a grad student in Greg Bratton's lab, and she's been leading this work. She did a number of qualitative interviews before the tree planting took place, and to better understand community perspectives on urban tree benefits and drawbacks as well. And one of the things she saw from the community is that they actually did, in many cases, recognize temperature regulation as a benefit of trees, in addition to aesthetics and other things that you all mentioned. So in many cases, this community where this project was happening did have perspectives and in which they see urban trees as beneficial. They also saw some drawbacks, so maintenance, I think about that a lot, for sure, in my yard, and damages to utilities, so definitely recognition of the drawbacks of trees as well. And also, one of the things that she explored was what are the kinds of actions that people are thinking about given urban heat and on hot days, and plans to purchase an AC unit was one of the big ones. To some extent, people are thinking about trees as a way of cooling as well, but maybe not as much, doesn't come to the mind as much as purchasing an air conditioner. The other thing that came up a lot, and is the one that sort of shaped our research moving forward, is air quality, and a lot of people expressed concern about air quality in the neighborhood. And so this is an example of ways that our qualitative research and the merging sort of social and environmental data collection has shaped the direction we go in. So now we are moving and launching this community air quality monitoring using Purple Air Loggers, which is a sort of community accessible, publicly accessible platform. You can install these at your house, and then the data gets uploaded to this system that anyone can see and access. So we're leveraging that system to install more loggers across Tacoma, which is an area that has historically not been compliant with some of the EPA standards, at least some neighborhoods in Tacoma. And so we're enhancing some of the air quality collection, but also wanting to define and quantify in our region what are relationships between trees and air quality. And so this is sort of there's divergent research in other locations of the extent to which trees can mitigate poor air quality. So this is something that we're moving forward with in our quantitative analyses to hopefully provide some useful information for this neighborhood and the city.
Yeah, so as I alluded to before, all these data and maps and things that we've been collecting really has been influential for us as an organization, because it helps us tell that story. It helps us tell a clear story about the need for trees as city infrastructure, like public health infrastructure, as well as environmental benefits that we were talking about before. And so my colleague Mike Carey at the City of Tacoma says that we're the best at being last in Tacoma, because we've kind of taken that story that we're in last place in the region, and we've been able to leverage that to bring more resources and more attention and more brain power to the problem. And then, of course, getting regular people involved in this. A lot of people come to our organization and our events because they want to do something tangible to help their neighborhood, help their neighbors, fight climate change, all different reasons that people come to us. But welcoming people into the process and being inclusive has been a really key strategy for us too, so that it's not just the tree huggers that are out there, it's people that realize they're making an investment in their own neighborhood. So those are some of the things that I think the research has helped us to kind of feed back into the community. So people know that, for instance, in South Tacoma, they know that their neighborhood is not that comfortable on a hot summer day. But for us to be able to bring data and to explain why, and then also to be able to explain with tree planting as one intervention, here's what we see, like here's how we see improvements. And so I think there's a really cool relationship here between the researchers and the community members, and then like our organization gets to be that in-between role. And that's been a really cool role for us to be in, and it's an honor, I think, to have people trust us with their stories, and then to be able to tell those stories to elected officials and hopefully advocate for more change and better policies around urban forestry. And I think I already touched on this, but yeah, based on all this data, our programs are designed to fill those needs that people share with us. So when people tell us that they need a tree that has flowers in the spring or something, we're able to be responsive and try to bring resources back to them. And the research helps us understand the nature of those needs from a whole bunch of different angles.
Yeah, so we'll move into just kind of our next steps and where we are in the research, and then we'd love to have take questions, and we have some questions for you too if there's time. So the next steps for GRIT include, so this is Olivia, who I mentioned a few times. She's working on analyzing the quantitative human community well-being survey, pre and post tree planting. So we'll be getting that. She's hoping to graduate this year, so that'll be done soon. And then we'll be integrating that research with some of the environmental data. So like for example, tree, how does your specific location, where you live, in relation to greenness, in relation to tree cover, how does that affect your responses to some of the community well-being questions that were asked? And then, as I mentioned, we're working to quantify and define some of the tree cover and air quality relationships in Tacoma. This is just some preliminary research from a student that I worked with who found that this is the effect of tree cover on average particulate matter 2.5. So we found like at different radii, we just looked at correlations between tree cover and greenness as quantified at different distances from the purple air loggers. So it seems like, you know, at a larger scale there is more of an effect. So I'm not sure if that to me suggests that that might reflect something about the sources of pollution as well. You have more greenness. This is the challenge with this sort of study, is it's you know, it is correlative, and so like, but we might be able to see if we look at a larger scale, are you seeing less pollution sources? That's my hypothesis when you look at if it's more of an effect at a larger scale versus at a fine scale. But we're looking at this with more data next year. We put in a bunch more loggers to try to better define this relationship and see like, what do we see within sort of, if you can look at a finer scale, if you add more trees, do you see any benefit on air quality, and are they able to mitigate some poor air quality or not? Do you really need to look at a larger scale to have an effect? And then we'll be continuing this into the, we want to try to continue this research as the trees last year, so they're not very big right now that were just planted, but we're hoping to continue this and look down the road as they get better. We expect the their benefits should grow as well. And then just to highlight that all this work becomes even more important, and urban trees are even more important as we think about climate change, and that we're going to be continuing to get hotter, and so they're a really key tool in the toolbox for enhancing community resilience to urban heat and to air quality that's expected to worsen climate change. So understanding these relationships and how communities are responding is a really critical part of the puzzle. So thank you. And we'd love to take your questions, and we also, if you don't have a lot of questions, we have questions for you. So, yeah, well, we can start with your questions if you want.
We also have 13 attendees online, so if you are on Zoom, including Olivia, so if you're on Zoom, please feel free to type those into the chat and I can convey those. But anyone in the room want to start?
I don't know if this is like something you've looked at or if you just have a sense of, but like, does it like matter what type, like species or just general like type of trees you're planting, and like they have different types of trees have different effects on like air quality and temperature and things like that?
Yeah, we haven't looked at we haven't looked at that yet, but we can with some of our data. We can, like with the field on the ground data that we collected, we can definitely look at that because we quantified at least within a 10-meter radius all the species, or at least the genus. So the identity and the size of the trees. When to look at larger scales, we used remote sense data sets like NOAA's CCAP data layer, and I don't think they eventually will, and maybe they have now gotten it at least to conifer versus deciduous, which would be, that's what we want to look at to see how do those differences and their ability to mitigate either urban heat or air quality vary across the year. I think that'll be a really interesting one to look at. We haven't done it yet.
I know for the stormwater issue, the conifers are especially important because they keep their leaves year-round, and during the rainy season, that's when they're working to slow down stormwater. So a lot of stormwater folks that are interested in urban forestry are pushing conifers. But also, I think just anecdotally, the larger the tree is, the more benefits it has. And that's true with temperatures and stormwater reduction and so on.
I live up in Edmonds, and there are a couple of neighborhoods up past where they're dramatically different policies regarding trees. Like Woodway has these massive mansions in the forest with huge trees all around. You can barely see the houses. And almost next door is Innis Arden, where there must be a regulation where you're not allowed to have trees.
Oh, interesting.
To preserve the views.
Oh, interesting.
And so both the neighbors are super rich, expensive neighbors to live in, but extremely different policies. And I'm wondering if that would be an interesting case study for.
That would be really interesting. Yeah, that would be really interesting. Like leveraging. Yeah, for now we've been I haven't been thinking about the policy differences. I don't know how much they differ within Tacoma, but definitely hoping to leverage them. Hoping that with enough locations we'll get enough variation to quantify some of those sorts. That's a really interesting case. That would be cool to look at policy differences and see how that plays out.
Yeah, especially with the wealth percentiles, like super wealthy people. Do they want trees or do they want their view?
Right, that's, tough choice.
It really depends, doesn't it? I think one of the parts of this region with the highest tree canopy is Mercer Island, which I associate with a lot of wealth, but they're not thinking about the views. They've got big trees and they want to keep it that way. And I think the cities that are proactive about policy, especially tree preservation on private property, are the ones that are making the most progress with tree canopy overall, because they're viewing the private property as a public benefit. But in Tacoma, we don't have that policy. So in Tacoma, your private property tree, you can cut it down if you want to. There's no rules at all. And so that's a big change that needs to happen if we're going to make progress on the tree canopy issue in Tacoma. But yeah, that's really interesting where there's a wealthy neighborhood but two different approaches.
Yeah, just a side note, if you do make any policies, Edmonds tried that. They announced they were going to have a tree policy, and they were considering charging I think it was $400 per big tree you chop down and $200 per small tree you chop down.
Mm-hmm.
I went around and measured our garden, which is surrounded by big trees, and it would cost us $10,000
Whoa.
in permits to
Wow.
chop down all our trees. Not that we were planning to.
Yeah.
And so they announced it. They were like, "We're gonna have public discussion, whatever." And our neighbors went and chopped their trees down,
Oh, before, just,
so
yeah.
they wouldn't have to pay permit fees in case
Right.
it went through.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
really sad.
And then they didn't pass the policy in the end.
Yeah.
So
Unintended consequences.
yeah.
Yeah.
When you're recommending trees, are you like focused on native species, or are you thinking like, 50 years out, 100 years out, when this tree is still like kind of peak of its lifespan, like maybe like a California adapted tree would be more suitable for this space?
Yeah, it's a really important conversation. I would say over 3/4 of the trees that we give to people are native species. That's, a lot of people are interested in that, but that's also what we have access to, like local seed sources, local saplings. Most of our trees we get donated as bare root trees, and they're little babies, and we, with volunteers, put them in pots with soil and wood chips and everything. So it's partly the supply issue, but when it comes to planting street trees, very few native species are suitable for street tree conditions, because the streets are almost like a different climate. It's hotter, they're exposed to pollution, the soil quality is generally terrible because it's on a roadway that has compacted gravel underneath or wherever. So lots of different reasons, but one thing we say is the environment next to the street is not a native environment, and so it doesn't work to have native species. But we also just want to have trees that are going to survive for their lifespan, and yeah, so we love native species for backyards and for habitat benefits, but especially on the street, we'd be looking at other species, and including like giant sequoias and incense cedar and things that are from ecosystems farther south of us. I don't know if everyone caught this, but in the last few years, they've actually updated our zone for climate for what plants are appropriate for the Northwest. So what is that, USDN?
Yeah, USDA. Department of Agriculture, planting zone, plant hardiness zone.
We're living in a different hardiness zone than we were just a few years ago. So that's gonna keep happening probably. Yeah.
When you put those temperature loggers on the poles, do you standardize are they all on the north side of the?
They're not all on the north side. They're not all on the north side. They're all on the side away from the street, if possible, because we have some poles on both sides, and weren't always able to put it on the north side. And they're all about the same height, 2 meters. I think that's the main standardization. They're in those shaded solar radiation shields to help prevent some of the things you might expect to see in terms of like shading effects or big differences you might see north to south, and there's clear flow, so I wouldn't expect the side of the pole to matter that much, but it might. I haven't tested that. Yeah.
Some of those poles are also like super bleached, and others are sort of like.
Yes,
tarred.
and that might have some effect on the immediate air quality for sure. Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. I haven't thought about that.
I thought the 2 maps was really compelling with the temperature and trees, but like putting on my reviewer number 2 hat could also like suggest not just like distance from the marine, but like sort of like surface area to volume. Like the peninsula, right, has like more exposure to marine than a bay maybe.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if you control for distance and sort of like I don't know what to call it, but like amount of marine exposure to a spot.
I think those things would,
How that would affect that relationship between temperature and tree cover.
Right, I think, yeah, so that was one of the nice things about working in such a small neighborhood is for this study, it was just in that, for our first study, it was all our temperature loggers are in this area. So I wasn't as worried about that sort of thing. But when we get to doing the air quality data, it's gonna be really important to control for those sorts of things if we wanna try to isolate the tree relationship. And so that's gonna be challenging. I'm gonna need to talk to some meteorologists probably, and I'm not sure who else, but yeah, we'll have to do some thinking about how to deal with those. Because for that, we have loggers all over the city. Yeah.
Yeah, visually there, it's like lots of tree cover next to the water, and the water is colder
Also cooling,
because
yes.
it gets
Yeah,
the
yeah.
breeze from the sea.
Exactly. Then for our study, we were just in this neighborhood, so I'm not so worried about it in that case, but looking at a larger scale, for sure, there's that component.
Yeah, and actually last year we got to do a study more of this footprint with the county, so outside Tacoma city limits. And some of the hottest areas were areas that were the farthest from the water. So yeah, it's definitely a factor in the heat issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, we see that with the snow. We're close to the water now. We always used to get the snow. We were like half a mile away, and now we never get any snow.
Interesting, yeah. The microclimates in
Yeah,
Seattle.
just drive uphill and there's the snow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Other questions?
What's your favorite tree?
My favorite tree currently is the London plane tree. If you think about Pioneer Square, it's full of London planes. And it's a hybrid of a plane tree and a sycamore, but it's really well suited to the urban climate or urban conditions. And I've, since I started noticing it, I've seen it in cities around the world that I've traveled to, so it's become a favorite of mine. How about you?
I really love, it's hard to choose one. Today, my favorite tree is sugar maple. It's starting to change color right now, it's really pretty, and as a native New Englander, I have a soft spot for sugar maples. I would love to hear, so I guess if you have thoughts on any of these are things I'd love to hear from you. If you have advice or ideas, so that was really helpful, just thinking about, but as we move into quantifying and defining the relationships between air quality and tree cover, if you have any advice or ideas, that would be great. But also, I thought this would be a good group to think about. So we presented like many different sorts of data that are used to prioritize where to plant trees or to think about some of these issues. Do you have ideas of like how to integrate all of these to support better support decision making, or other ideas about that? And then lastly, I'm curious how you all think about, as I'm assuming some of you are quantitative ecologists in some way, how do you integrate your quantitative analyses with like on the ground context or other qualitative work? I'm curious how you think about these. If any of those pops up, any of those would love to hear, or if people have anything.
Nothing online.
Yeah.
I mean, the main advice I give you right now is to start looking at things like what Andrew brought up, which is what are all the factors that can influence temperature, and what other things are you trying to control?
Yeah.
So that when you finally come down to doing your big analysis, you have columns of, okay, it's on the north or the south side of the pole, this is how far it is away from the sea, this is the population density, so they're all set up with all possible things. Because once you've got that, you can ask someone who's highly quantitative to do GLM or a GAM or a mixed effects model, whatever, like random forest or whatever. Yeah, random forest models would be exactly what you or whatever it is that analytical technique is to tease out the effects from all the possible covariates that could make a difference. That'd be one, but I'm sure you've done that. That's like really obvious.
No, it's a good. I haven't started putting together those things for air quality yet, because I think there's a lot. But yeah, need to start doing that.
We do have two online if you'd like to go into that.
Yeah.
This is such exciting work. Thank you, from Morgan. I would really be curious to hear your thoughts on opportunities to work with low-income housing developers and rethink how to incorporate trees and canopy cover into development design for all of these benefits. I imagine that roots, maintenance, tree fall risk could be a concern for developers, and wonder how we can balance all of those things.
question. Tough one. Yeah, trees in the city, we have a housing crisis as well as a tree crisis. So we have to have more houses at the same time that we have more trees. And currently Seattle's going the wrong direction on this. There was a tree canopy, or a tree policy update a couple years ago, and it seems like Seattle at least is losing trees in accordance with where the development is happening. Now, in a generation, if they've got good requirements for planting alongside the buildings, you know, the trees will come back. They'll grow back if they're required to be planted. So you got to get that balance right when development does happen, because that's often when big trees get removed. And an issue that we see with development too is that you might require trees to be planted, but are you required to keep them alive? And if the ownership changes hands, yeah, it's funny, but it's not funny. Yeah, so we see this in Tacoma where street trees are required if a development happens, and then they don't follow up and they don't water them, and so they're not alive within a few months. Sometimes they plant them in the middle of the summer and they don't water them. So lots of issues. On the low income piece, I think there's sometimes a reverse incentive for developers, where they'll give discounts if you build low-income housing or tax breaks or whatever, and sometimes that lets them build larger units on a property and have less space for trees. So not only on the neighborhood level would we have fewer trees, but on the low-income lots themselves, they're going to have a lower quality of green space access. So it's a big question, and I would love to try to reverse those incentives. So like, hey, you're doing low-income development, you have to have more trees. But I think that would be on a city-by-city basis.
I think we have time for this one more online, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Have you seen any interactions between fire smoke and the associated spikes in particulate matter and tree density affecting localized air quality?
Yeah, that's exactly what we're going to be looking at. And so far, we've looked at, like, our preliminary analyses have, no, we haven't looked at spikes. Let's see. We've looked at more sort of average particulate matter across the summer, and also just number of hours where the air quality was above EPA standards. And so that's kind of what we've looked at so far and found, effects of trees either at larger scales like I showed, or within really close distances. But yeah, that'll be interesting to look at. We definitely saw spikes in particulate matter on July 4th as well. So I'm looking, we'll look at those.